Advertising is a big investment, so you need to be able to assess the return you get, your ROI. What are the outcomes? That's the question we seek to answer with campaign monitoring and evaluation. To make any sense of the value for money that you get from your advertising, you first need a set of objectives against which you can measure your performance. Indeed, with some forms of advertising, for example direct response advertising, it is possible to secure a contract with an agency to pay by performance. But you need very clear objectives to benchmark the payments that you're going to make. However, in most cases, you'll be working with proxy indicators. You'll be measuring the performance against indicators that are the best representation of what you really want, because it's going to be very hard to measure precisely what you really want. For example, it's almost impossible to attribute individual sales to a particular advertising campaign, although of course you can do customer surveys for new customers to find out why they decided to buy. So we'll often use proxies or key performance indicators that measure things like the change in sales based year on year or month on month. So there are two important processes in the monitoring and evaluation of an advertising campaign, and those are objective setting and gathering of research data. First, we need to set measurable objectives for our campaign. As an example, the objective to communicate the benefits of our product to potential customers is a sound objective, but it's very hard to measure. You can't know directly how many people now know more about your product than they did before your campaign. But it is possible to set up appropriate measurable proxies. For example, you could set the objective of placing the advert in front of 300,000 potential customers. That way you can measure how many people actually see it. Or you could set an objective of a percentage increase, say 15% increase in brand knowledge and understanding as measured by focus groups. You'll take a sample focus group before the advertising goes out, or maybe several samples to get better statistics, and then you'll repeat after the advert and see the increase, hopefully, in the number of people within the focus groups that are able to understand your brand or your product accurately. And as a result, it's worth noting that one of the huge advantages of internet-based advertising is the huge wealth of data that you can get online. Most websites, most advertising providers on the web are able to capture huge amounts of data about their customers and what they see. Of course, this also carries with it the obligation to understand how to analyze that data, and of course there are experts who will set themselves up to do that. You can get a huge amount of data from the internet, and of course there is a cost to that. As an example, the same campaign run on YouTube would allow you to measure the number of customers that watch the whole advert without clicking off it. You could set a target that 15% of people that the advert is presented to actually watch the whole advert. And you could gather that data very easily and very precisely through the YouTube platform. Therefore, the other part of the process is to assess whether your customers have got the message you intended, to gather data from the marketplace. And of course, the gold standard here is behavior. What are people actually doing? Are they doing what you intended them to do? Of course, with informational campaigns, that could be impossible to measure because you're not asking them to do anything. But with a call to purchase, if you see an increase in sales as a result of your campaign, then you can be fairly sure the campaign has been successful. But in reality, there are two reasons why this may not be practical. Firstly, as I say, because your message didn't include an action, but secondly, because they haven't done it yet. Some people take a long time to buy. You put your advert out today, it may be weeks or months later that your potential customers buy. In this case, it's intent that you need to assess. In this case, it's focus groups and questionnaires that can be really useful because you're trying to evaluate whether your message has really got through. But beyond a definite buying intent, there are two concepts that are really useful to understand, and these are recall and recognition. They're both about the extent to which your customers and your audience remember the messages you put out. But recall and recognition are different. The higher standard is recall, particularly unprompted recall. If you ask people if they saw an advert for your brand and they can recall the messages in it, that's recall. If you ask customers for products within a particular product space and they recall your brand, that's recall. But sometimes they won't spontaneously recall your messages or your brand, but when shown your brand, they will recognize it. When shown the advert, they will recognize the messages. That's valuable memory, but it's by no means as strong and as powerful. It's what I might call back of mind rather than front of mind. Recall is front of mind, recognition is back of mind. But what you really want is that immediate preference and intent. In testing audience responses, you may also be interested in their attitudes to your brand, to your product, to whatever you're putting out in your advertising. How do they feel? Do they feel antipathy? Do they feel neutral? Do they feel sympathy for your product or service? Or a preference for it over competitors, or an intention to buy? Or, best of all, are they prepared to advocate for it? This gives us the hierarchy of antipathy, neutral, sympathy, preference, intention, and advocacy. But if you can make them, the best measures are of course those that directly link to your business objectives: sales, growth, brand recognition, product preference, or even switching allegiance from a competitor's product to yours. Finally, it's worth mentioning that if you can't get good information on the valuable output measures that represent real value, there's always the input measures of how often your advert appeared, the level of audience that it had, the number of clicks on your web advert. All of these are useful measures, but ultimately they are proxies for what you really care about. So my conclusion is this: the most important thing is to define the right measures. And this is about measures that you actually care about and measures that you can both access and assess. Please do give a thumbs up if you like this video. There'll be loads more great content for you on Management Courses, so please do subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any of it. I look forward to seeing you in the next video, and in the meantime, keep learning.